Hi, my name is Amelia, and today I bring you another true crime case. On June 28, 2007, when Paige Bergfeld, a devoted mother, failed to return to her apartment, the police launched a thorough investigation. However, what they uncovered would not only shock Paige Bergfeld's family, but also the entire nation. Paige Bergfeld was born on April 27, 1973, in Atlanta, Georgia, to Frank and Suzanne Bergfeld. She had just one sibling, her brother, Craig. Paige grew up in Atlanta before moving to Colorado. In 1995, she married her first love and high school sweetheart, Howard Ron Bagler. However, their once bright relationship ended when the two disagreed about starting a family. Paige was ready for children, but Howard was not interested in parenthood. After the divorce, Paige moved on and, in 1998, married Rob Dixon, an ambitious young businessman. Their 10-year marriage was intense and resulted in 3 children, Jess, Taft, and Cole. June 28, 2007 became the last day Paige Bergfeld was ever seen by her loved ones. That afternoon, she had spent time with her ex-husband, Howard Bagler. The two had rekindled their relationship just 2 months before her sudden disappearance. Following their picnic, Paige and Howard went their separate ways. Around 9 p.m. that evening, Howard called Paige to check on her. She told him she was heading back to her apartment and would text once she got home. But that message never came. When Howard didn't hear from Paige, he tried calling again, only to be sent directly to voicemail. This alarmed him, as it meant her phone was either switched off or unreachable. On the 3rd day after their date, Howard went to Paige's apartment. What he found shocked him. Paige's live-in nanny told him she had not returned home for 3 days. Howard immediately contacted Paige's parents and the police, triggering one of the most chilling investigations of its kind. Frank and Suzanne Bergfeld were devastated by the disappearance of their beloved daughter. Their conviction that something was terribly wrong pushed the police to look deeper. Frank described Paige as the most devoted mother imaginable. She would never abandon her children. He even said that if both her legs and arms were broken, she would crawl on her elbows just to reach them. That was how much she loved being around her kids. Everyone close to Paige knew her children were her absolute priority. Her brother, Craig, a plastic surgeon specializing in pediatric facial reconstruction, left his home in Seattle to be with Paige's kids in Grand Junction, Colorado. He and his wife, Claire, understood that Paige's children always came first and their safety was paramount. Given Paige's deep devotion as a mother, investigators were convinced she hadn't just abandoned her kids. Something was preventing her from coming back, and they were determined to uncover it. Mesa County Sheriff Matt Hilke began leading the case. As in most missing person cases, the closest individuals and the last to see the victim became the first to be investigated. Naturally, Howard Bagler was questioned, as he had been the last person to see Paige before she vanished. But could he have harmed her? In an interview, Paige's father firmly denied that possibility, saying Ron Bagler had always been Paige's greatest love. They had been inseparable since high school, and after reconnecting over a decade later, Frank was certain Howard would never hurt her. Yet, the investigation revealed another layer, Paige's complicated love life. She had another man in her life, one that raised serious concerns. In 1998, Paige had remarried after meeting Rob Dixon in 1997. At the time, he was full of charm and charisma, and Paige quickly fell for him. Her father described their brief relationship before marrying Gay as a whirlwind. Rob Dixon was doing very well in his business and had a good amount of wealth. However, after their marriage, Rob Dixon became reckless. He had extravagant taste and had an eye for bad investments. He invested millions of dollars in bad investments. A good few years later, he had lost almost everything. Paige made an effort in helping with their finances by starting a small preschool dance she named Brain Dance. She also started selling kitchen appliances at home for a company called The Pampered Chef. But Rob was spending money faster than Paige was making it. This brought tension into their marriage. Frank Bergfeld shared how Rob's personality was unpredictable. He saw him as a good rib and has Rob. Sometimes he could be cheerful, friendly, and bubbly. But there were times he was mean, condescending, irritable, and short-tempered. During times like that, it was always hard being around him. He described being around bad Rob as walking on eggshells. This revelation made Rob Dixon even more important in the police's investigation. Before Paige divorced Rib Dixon, she had reported a case of threat to the police. At the end of October 2004, Paige called 911 to report her husband. She claimed that she was having a fight with Rob, and then he asked the kids to stay with him. He then promised her that she would return to find that he had murdered the children. By the time the police and the local media arrived at the Dixon apartment, the issue had been sorted, so no charges were filed. However, a year later, Paige Bergfeld reported another disturbing incident to 911. She and Rob fought, and he pushed her to the ground while she was carrying their baby, and still went ahead to punch her in the stomach. The police arrested Rob this time, but he was released after he completed a course in anger management. The Mesa County Sheriff's Office questioned Rob Dixon. Rob Dixon claimed that he was in Philadelphia on the day Paige Bergfeld disappeared. After their divorce, Rob moved to Philadelphia. However, as much as Rob's personality and biography with Paige was gruesome, he had been 2,000 miles away from Grand Junction on the day she disappeared. After the police interviewed Rob, they refused to release details of the interview to the public. Paige's father, Frank Bergfeld, upon finding out that Rob Dixon had a solid alibi, concluded that even men with the most monstrous personalities could not commit murder while they were 2,000 miles away. Although, despite no longer being a suspect, Rob Dixon still remained a cause of concern to the Bergfeld family. 3 months before her disappearance, Paige had posted disturbing contents about Rob on an online message board. She had shared how her children would ask her if their father was going to kill her. She confessed in the post that she could imagine her kids thinking of what life would be like if she actually died. Now, since both Paige's ex-husbands had very powerful alibis, the police had to look for a new suspect. But every person who was close to Paige Bergfeld was in the clear, so who then could have been responsible for her disappearance? This led the police to uncovering a very shocking truth about Paige Bergfeld herself. Paige Bergfeld, to her family and friends, was a devoted mother, hard-wearing woman, and a very bubbly soul. Her father, in an interview with her, shared how Paige loved to bring the family together. It was one of her favorite things to do. She was always very happy whenever her family was together. One thing Bergfeld never expected was Paige's double life. Paige Bergfeld had been living a double life. In addition to Grand Junction, she was a dance teacher and a kitchen appliances vendor. But on the internet, Paige Bergfeld was something else entirely. After she disappeared, her family had found something suspicious on her laptop. Confident that it would not change anything about how he felt about his daughter, Frank Bergfeld called the attention of the police to it. The investigation by the police revealed that Paige had another source of income from being a dance teacher. Paige was an expensive escort. She was known as Carrie. On provocative internet ads, she hinted that customers could get extra services like nude massages and topless. The Bergfeld family was shocked by their daughter's double life. Paige's sister-in-law, Carrie Bergfeld, confessed that it was an absolute shock finding out about Paige's other job some days after she went missing. It was unexpected that Paige worked as an escort, but her family seemed to know exactly why she did it. Paige, as always, was driven by her love for her children. Her father, Frank Bergfeld, believed that Paige had chosen that path because of her family. After the divorce, she had taken on a huge responsibility. She was the breadwinner and the sole provider of her family. It was not easy taking of 3 children, and Paige was obsessed with giving her kids the best. However, the extent to which she went was the last thing Frank Bergfeld and Susanna Bergfeld expected. In an interview, Frank Bergfeld admitted that he wished Paige had opened up. He would have happily intervened and counseled his child on the dangers of the path she had chosen. Frank believed Paige's job was not totally moral. Although Paige's parents were righteously shocked by their daughter's secret profession, one thing that would never change was their deep love and pride for Paige. Craig Bergfeld was also confident that Paige had chosen her profession because of her kids. Paige was neck-deep in debt. It was not cheap putting clothes on the back of 3 kids, and on top of that, she had to pay the mortgage. Craig had always found it hard to believe that the little dance school and selling kitchen appliances was lucrative enough to pay off a monthly mortgage of $6,000. Although he had never called anybody's attention to it, he suspected Paige was into something else. However, he had not imagined she would be an escort. Paige's ex-husband had filed for bankruptcy immediately after the divorce. Craig had thought that his sister would be unable to pay the mortgage after a couple of months, as it was a huge amount of money. But Paige succeeded in buying her first home. Craig's wife, Callie, admitted that she had found it very hard to accept that Paige had purchased her first home with her 2 jobs. In an interview, she confessed that she had confronted Paige about it. She shared how she outrightly asked Paige if she had another thing she was doing aside from teaching dance and selling kitchen equipment. Paige confessed to her sister-in-law that she was a stripper. A few years before Paige got married, she had been living in Denver. When she was 21, she stripped at the Mile High Saloon. While she was a stripper, she made around $400,000 per month. Paige told Callie that she stopped when she got married. But apparently, she had not totally left that industry. In the interview, Callie was convinced that Paige drew her inspiration to become an escort from her experience as a stripper. The Mesa County prosecutor, D.A. Pete Houtzinger, confessed that he had never encountered a case like Paige's, even though he had been a prosecutor for 20 years. He had never thought someone of her socio-economic background and family background would be involved in that kind of job. Houtzinger admitted that Paige Bergfeld looked exactly like what a responsible and doting mother should be, so it was a huge shock that she lived a double life. Paige's double life set a deeper investigation on motion. Paige's parents knew that the new discovery was going to be very instrumental in finding out what truly happened to Paige. However, as much as the Bergfeld family wanted a form of closure, they were not sure if they really wanted to know the truth. Craig Bergfeld had shared his fear after a concerned Grand Junction resident, Connie Fluke, organized a search team to find Paige Bergfeld. Fluke had made up her mind to cover Mesa County and fish out Paige. Mesa County Sheriff confessed that Mesa County was a very big place, stretching at over 5,000 miles, with a lot of canyons and woods. There were tons of places to hide a person. However, Connie Fluke was determined. She came up with a strategy to divide and conquer. Each day, she divided the county into manageable, searchable units that can be covered by walking. Fluke had been very helpful to the case. The Bergfeld family admitted that her efforts brought a ray of hope to their minds. Fluke explained in an interview that she was thrilled by the support she got from the people. On the day the search kicked off, she arrived at the venue at 6:15 to set up, and people started arriving by 6:30. They were literally jumping all over her, asking her to assign them to search groups. The efforts of Fluke's search team were promising. However, the success it could bring scared the Bergfeld family. Craig Bergfeld confessed that he was not ready to find out what had happened to his sister. It was not easy for him to hold on to the thought that she was still alive, but the police had an inclination that Paige Bergfeld was never coming back. The reason, they had not figured out yet, but they knew it had something to do with Paige's secret job. The chief district attorney, Dan Rubenstein, the new prosecutor in charge of Paige Bergfeld's case, found a suspect, Lester Ralph Jones, a middle-aged customer of Paige's escort services. Dan Rubenstein was convinced that Ralph Jones had a hand in the disappearance of Paige Bergfeld, but his hands were tied. The district attorney could not prove anything without Paige's body. The investigation began to drag over an awfully long period of time. This became a source of concern for Frank Bergfeld. A concerned father that he was, he believed that the police were deliberately stalling the investigation, and they did not want to find his daughter's killer. It was a welcome development for both the police department and the Bergfeld family when a hiker found the remains of a body in 2012. It was a relief for the district attorney, Dan Rubenstein, when the hiker found Paige's body as he was already under so much pressure. The Bergfeld family was already so frustrated. However, although the news that Dan Rubenstein had to break to Paige's family was absolutely heartbreaking, it was a blessing. After the hiker found the body, the police department was not sure it was Paige's, but after carrying out necessary tests, the teeth and jaw matched Paige. However, it was shocking that Paige's body had been at the spot the hiker found it. That area was covered during the search organized by Connie Fluke, but no one found Paige's body. The investigation began to drag over an awfully long period of time. This became a source of concern for Frank Bergfeld. A concerned father that he was, he believed that the police were deliberately stalling the investigation, and they did not want to find his daughter's killer. It was a welcome development for both the police department and the Bergfeld family when a hiker found the remains of a body in 2012. It was a relief for the district attorney Dan Rubenstein when the hiker found Paige's body, as he was already under so much pressure. The Bergfeld family was already so frustrated. However, although the news that Dan Rubenstein had to break to Paige's family was absolutely heartbreaking, it was a blessing. After the hiker found the body, the police department was not sure it was Paige's, but after carrying out necessary tests, the teeth and jaw matched Paige. However, it was shocking that Paige's body had been at the spot the hiker found it. That area was covered during the search, organized by Connie Fluke, but no one found Paige's body. The investigators figured that the murderer must have buried Paige inside a grave deep enough for the search party to miss. Don Rubenstein was happy that he had enough evidence to bring Lester Ralph Jones in. The police could not tell exactly how Paige Bergfeld had died, but they were sure that it was violent. Paige had a fracture in her jaw. The investigators believed that her assailant must have beaten her up. Also, there were remains of duct tape around the corners of her mouth. Paige's jaw fractured shortly before she passed away. This discovery made the items found during the search organized by Connie Fluke make sense. Pieces of documents were found scattered along the highway. Some of the documents had Paige's name, while others had her kids' names. The investigators assumed that the documents must have been flung outside by Paige's kidnapper as he drove her to the spot where he finally took her life. There were other speculations, too. The documents could have been flung outside by Paige as a way of helping people to find her. However, Paige's killer had roamed free 5 years after her terrifying end. Lester Ralph Jones did not have a good reputation, so it was easy to believe that he killed Paige Bergfeld. Don Rubenstein gathered enough evidence against Lester Ralph Jones. During the investigation, the police had found Paige's car on the highway. The car had been burned by a fire the police believed started in the passenger seat. Someone had set Paige's car ablaze deliberately to destroy his DNA samples or any implicating evidence. Also, the driver's seat had been adjusted to accommodate a taller person. Although, when interrogated, Ralph Jones denied knowing anything about Paige's burnt car, even though it had been found a few meters away from his workshop. Lester Ralph Jones had a criminal history. He had been convicted of felony, so no one could ever take him for his word. Another daunting piece of evidence was found against Ralph Jones. He had called Paige Bergfeld with a burner phone on the day she disappeared. Ralph Jones denied buying the phone, even though there was a CCTV recording of him purchasing the phone. Ralph Jones was a regular at Paige Escorting Services. However, Paige did not know he was a cold-blooded murderer. Ralph Jones met his Waterloo after a conversation he had with a local sheriff, Sergeant Art Smith. He had called Ralph Jones to tell him his cars were ready. Sergeant Art Smith had seized 2 cars belonging to Jones. Ralph Jones' response was absolutely unexpected and shocking. It was the response of a man whose guilt was destroying him. Ralph Jones replied, if the sergeant asked him where he would bury a body. This call, along with the other evidence, was the breakthrough the police needed. In November 2014, 7 years after the disappearance of Paige Bergfeld, Lesnar Ralph Jones was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping. Ralph Jones had been anticipating the arrest. He had not been moved at all. According to the police officers who arrested him, Ralph Jones had not asked any question. He simply turned around and put his hand behind his back. His bail was set to $2 million. In 2016, Ralph appeared in court. According to the jury, the evidence against Ralph Jones was circumstantial. They were enough to incarcerate him. But in December 2016, 9 years after Paige's disappearance, the jury found Ralph Jones guilty of murder and kidnapping. He was sentenced to life imprisonment